For 3 years, I was building a future with a woman I was going to marry. But her male best friend, a manipulative leech I was supporting, was constantly trying to tear us apart. At a dinner party in my own home, he finally went too far. When she defended him and told me to apologize or we were over, I smiled. She had no idea what over truly meant. For 3 years, my life with Anna felt like an anchor in a storm. As a lawyer, my days are spent navigating the murky, treacherous waters of human conflict, a constant barrage of deceit, greed, and broken trust. Coming home to Anna was my safe harbor. It was like stepping out of a suffocating courtroom and into the clean, crisp air of a mountain morning. She was a paralegal, whip-smart, and ambitious, with a fierce determination to attend law school and carve out her own legacy. I didn't just love that about her. I admired it. I was invested in it. We weren't just a couple. We were a team, building a life brick by brick in a house I'd spent years meticulously restoring. This wasn't a temporary arrangement, a casual cohabitation. Every bill I paid, every renovation I undertook, was an investment in a woman I was certain I would marry. Our life felt solid, tangible, real. But beneath the surface of our carefully constructed happiness, there was always a persistent, low-level hum of static, a subtle dissonance that I could never quite ignore. That static had a name: Leo. Leo was Anna's best friend from college, her self-proclaimed platonic soulmate. He was a graphic designer, one of those perpetually struggling artists who wore his disdain for the 9-to-5 world like a badge of honor, as if financial instability was a sign of moral purity. He spoke of passion and creativity with a religious fervor, all while designing menus for local taco joints to barely scrape together his rent. To hear Anna describe him, he was her protector, her confidant, the one constant in her life who had been there through every storm. From my perspective, he was a parasitic mooch with a staggering superiority complex, a man who seemed to have made it his life's mission to systematically undermine our relationship. And I had to admit, he was an artist at it. His methods were insidious, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. He never did anything so overt that I could call him out on it without sounding like a jealous, controlling boyfriend. It was all subtle digs, veiled insults, and carefully placed poison darts disguised as friendly banter. His favorite weapon was Anna's ex-boyfriend, Alex, a musician who had apparently shattered her heart into a million pieces. Leo positioned himself as the guardian of her fragile heart, and I was the bland, uninspired choice she had settled for out of fear. If I took Anna on a luxurious vacation to Mexico, a trip I'd planned for months, Leo would inevitably find a way to reminisce about some spontaneous, poorly planned camping trip they had taken years ago. "Remember that, Anna?" he'd say, his eyes misting over with manufactured nostalgia. "We just threw a tent in the car and drove." You can't plan moments like that. You just have to be with someone who gets your free spirit. The implication was always crystal clear. I was the boring, predictable provider, the safe choice. He, and by extension, the ghost of her passionate ex, represented the exciting, authentic life she was leaving behind. And Anna, blinded by years of his protective friend act, absorbed it all without question. She saw his constant interference not as a red flag, but as a sign of his deep, unwavering loyalty. Anytime I gently probed, hinting that his comments were out of line, she would leap to his defense. "He's just being Leo," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "He was there for me when Alex destroyed me. He's just fiercely protective. He's family, Jack. I am, by nature and by profession, a patient man." In a courtroom, you learn that the most damning evidence often comes from your opponent's own mouth. You don't lunge at the first inconsistency. You wait. You observe. You let them talk. Let them build their own case against themselves with their arrogance and their lies. You let them weave the very rope they will use to hang themselves. And then, when the moment is right, you simply hand it to them. For 3 years, I waited for Leo to hand me the rope. That moment arrived a month ago. I had just won the single biggest case of my career. It was a brutal, all-consuming battle that had devoured 6 months of my life. I'd endured countless sleepless nights, sacrificed weekends, and poured every ounce of my being into a mountain of paperwork and legal strategy. But we won. It was a landmark victory for my firm and a career-defining moment for me. To celebrate, to finally exhale after half a year of holding my breath, I threw a dinner party. My closest friends, the ones who had patiently tolerated my absence, were all there. And in a final, fateful act of goodwill, I told Anna to invite her friends. Which, of course, meant Leo would be in attendance, a specter at my feast of victory. The evening started perfectly. The house, our house, was filled with a warm buzz of laughter and genuine camaraderie. The expensive bottle of scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion was open, its peaty aroma mingling with the scent of the catered dinner. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was actually truly relaxing. Leo, naturally, was in his element, soaking up the free, high-quality liquor and holding court as if he were the host. After a few glasses of my best wine, he was sufficiently emboldened to begin his performance. He launched into a long, insufferably boring tangent about a new art exhibit he'd seen, which was merely a clumsy segue into his favorite topic, the philosophical divide between the creators and the suits. It's just a different way of seeing the world, he pontificated, his gaze landing pointedly on me. Some of us are driven by passion, by the need to create art. Others, he paused for dramatic effect, are more practical. He took a long, slow sip of the wine I had paid for, his eyes glinting with smug satisfaction. My friends, all professionals who understood the game he was playing, were shooting him looks that could curdle milk. I simply offered a tight, dismissive smile and refused to take the bait. But he was just warming up. He turned his attention to Anna, his expression shifting into one of deep, feigned concern. "I just hope you're happy, Anna," he said, his voice a masterclass in false sincerity. "I mean, Jack's a great guy. He's stable. He's a provider. He's reliable." He said the word reliable as if it were a communicable disease. He let the word hang in the air, a deliberate insult. Then he paused, locked his eyes directly onto mine, and allowed a slow, triumphant smirk to spread across his face. "But you got to admit," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the now silent table, "she could do way better than you." And there it was, the rope. He hadn't just handed it to me. He had tied the noose and placed it around his own neck. The lively chatter of the dinner party evaporated. The silence was so absolute, so profound, that the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a drumbeat. My friends stared, their faces a mixture of shock and barely concealed rage. I saw my friend Mark physically clench his fists under the table. Anna, to her credit, had the decency to look embarrassed. She stared down at her plate, a faint blush creeping up her neck. But there was no anger in her eyes, no fury on my behalf, just the mild discomfort of someone whose dinner companion had made a social faux pas. In that single, crystalline moment, everything came into sharp, brutal focus. The patient lawyer, the accommodating boyfriend, the man who had turned the other cheek for 3 years, vanished. In his place stood the man who had just been profoundly disrespected in his own home, in front of his dearest friends, by a sniveling freeloader who was currently enjoying his hospitality. I carefully placed my fork and knife on my plate, the clink of silver on ceramic echoing in the stillness. I folded my hands on the table and fixed my gaze on Leo. The friendly host had left the building. The prosecutor had just taken his place at the podium. "That's a bold claim, Leo," I said, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of any emotion. "And since you made it so publicly, I'm genuinely interested in your reasoning. In your expert opinion, what, precisely, does a better man for Anna look like? Please be specific. Lay out the criteria for the court." Leo was completely blindsided. He had been expecting a shouting match, an emotional outburst. He was not prepared for a calm, methodical cross-examination. Well, he stammered, his bravado instantly deflating. Someone more on her level. A creative. Someone who just gets her." "I see," I said, nodding slowly as if considering a complex legal argument. "So, the primary qualification is being a creative. An interesting theory. And I assume you see yourself as fitting this description." "I think I understand her better than anyone," he said, attempting to puff out his chest, a pathetic display of bravado. "Perfect," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "So, you're the gold standard. Let's examine that, shall we? Let's add a few other, more tangible factors to this analysis. Let's move beyond nebulous vibes and talk about something more concrete. Let's talk about investment." I let my gaze sweep across the table, ensuring I had everyone's undivided attention. As everyone here knows, Anna is currently in her second year of law school. It's a top-tier program with a price tag to match. A significant investment of capital, of course, but more importantly, an investment of faith. Faith in her abilities and faith in our future together. I am paying for that tuition. In full. I turn my eyes back to Leo. "So, my question for you, Leo, as the self-appointed gold standard of what is better for Anna, is this: what have you invested in her future lately, other than your consistently negative opinions about me? Leo's face went completely white. Anna shot me a panicked, pleading look. Jack, don't do this, she whispered across the table. I held up a single hand to silence her, my eyes never leaving Leo's. I'm not finished, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Let's discuss the car she drives. A safe, reliable vehicle that gets her to and from school without issue. I bought that car for her. Now you have a car too, don't you, Leo? A cool little convertible that seems to be in a perpetual state of disrepair. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, Anna has had to loan you money for repairs on at least 3 separate occasions in the last 6 months. Money, I might add, that she took from the household account that I and only I deposit funds into. So, in a very real and quantifiable sense, Leo, I am not just investing in Anna's future. I'm also subsidizing the continued operation of your little hipster mobile. You're welcome. One of my friends at the end of the table let out a snore of laughter, quickly disguising it as a cough. Leo looked as if I had physically struck him. And finally, I said, leaning forward, my voice now a low, menacing purr, let's talk about this house. The roof over her head. The place where you're currently enjoying a free meal and expensive wine. I own this house. I pay the mortgage. I maintain the property. You, on the other hand, have been late on your rent so many times that Anna has had to cover for you, again with money that I earned. So, allow me to summarize your argument for the jury, for the table. Your position is that a man who provides a stable home, a reliable car, and a fully funded, top-tier legal education is an inferior choice for Anna. And that a better man, by your definition, is one who is a financial black hole, a man who actively drains her resources, and who repays her kindness by systematically attempting to sabotage her relationship out of what can only be described as a pathetic, transparent, and frankly, deeply creepy obsession. Is that a fair and accurate summary of your position, Leo? I leaned back in my chair. My closing argument was complete. The room was a vacuum, devoid of all sound. Leo was a broken man, a hostile witness who had been utterly eviscerated on the stand. He sat there, humiliated and mute, his face a blotchy canvas of shame. I glanced at my friends, who were all staring at Leo with undisguised contempt. Then I turned my gaze to Anna. Her face was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. But the one that ultimately won out, the one that broke through the shock and embarrassment, was not relief. It was not gratitude for my defense. It was pure, unadulterated, white-hot fury. She shot up from her chair, the legs scraping violently against the hardwood floor. Her entire body was trembling with rage. I cannot believe you just did that, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You humiliated him, in front of everyone. He humiliated himself, Anna, I said, my voice weary now, the adrenaline fading. I merely presented the evidence. Apologize to him, she demanded, her eyes blazing with a fire that was aimed entirely and exclusively at me. Right now, apologize to my best friend for what you just did. Apologize, she repeated, her voice rising, or we are over. And there it was, the ultimatum, the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. She was standing next to the smoldering wreckage of a man who had just been exposed as a manipulative, parasitic user, and she was defending him. She was choosing him. In that moment, the love I had for her didn't just fade, it was summarily executed. I looked at her, at this woman I thought I knew, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw her with perfect, painful clarity. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply smiled. It was a small, sad, and completely final smile. I didn't say another word. I stood up, picked up my wine glass, and walked into the kitchen, leaving her standing alone in the silent dining room, the echoes of her ultimatum hanging in the air like poison. The case was closed. The verdict was in. The immediate aftermath of the dinner party was swift and decisive. Anna and Leo departed together in a flurry of self-righteous drama, leaving my friends and me in a state of stunned silence. She moved in with him that very night, a decision undoubtedly forged in the crucible of her misplaced rage and his abject humiliation. In her mind, she had thrown down a challenge, and she was waiting for me to come groveling. She expected apologies, begging, a desperate attempt to repair the damage she believed I had caused. She had absolutely no comprehension that I had simply and irrevocably accepted her terms. For 2 weeks, I enacted a policy of complete and total radio silence. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't reply to the relentless barrage of text messages that transitioned from angry and accusatory to confused and bewildered, and finally to pleading and desperate. I ignored the well-meaning mutual friends she dispatched as emissaries to plead her case. To her, I had become a ghost. Instead of chasing a relationship that was already dead, I got to work. My house, which had once felt like our shared home, now felt like a crime scene that needed to be sterilized. I spent an entire weekend systematically and dispassionately packing every single item she owned into cardboard boxes. Her clothes, her books, her toiletries, every photograph, every knickknack. It wasn't an act of anger. It was a cleansing and administrative task. I was the executor, settling the estate of a deceased relationship. When every trace of her was erased, I stacked the boxes neatly in the spare bedroom, called a locksmith to change every lock on the property and reset the security codes. Then I made 2 phone calls. They brought me no joy, but they were the necessary and logical consequences of the verdict she herself had delivered at that dinner party. The first call was to the dean of admissions at her prestigious law school. As a prominent alumnus and donor, I had a cordial relationship with him. I explained in calm and professional terms that due to a permanent and irreconcilable change in my personal circumstances, the private scholarship fund I had personally established to cover Anna's tuition was being dissolved, effective immediately. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a quiet, "I see. I'm sorry to hear that, Jack." The second call was to the managing partner of my law firm. I had pulled a significant number of strings and cashed in a lot of favors to secure Anna a coveted, career-making summer internship at the firm. I explained to my boss that a severe and unavoidable personal conflict of interest had arisen, and as a matter of professional ethics, the internship offer had to be rescinded. He was understanding, if not a little curious, but didn't press for details. I didn't do these things for revenge. My support for her, financial, emotional, professional, was built upon the foundational contract of our partnership. At that dinner party, she had taken a sledgehammer to that foundation. She could no longer be allowed to live in the house she had helped to burn down. Exactly 2 weeks to the day after the dinner, she appeared on my doorstep. I watched on the security camera feed as she fumbled with her now useless key, her initial confusion quickly curdling into frustrated anger. She finally resorted to ringing the doorbell. I opened the door, but only as far as the security chain would allow. She looked terrible. The righteous fury she had brandished 2 weeks prior was gone, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out desperation. The reality of living with a broke, narcissistic artist had clearly been a harsh and unpleasant education. "Jack, we need to talk," she said, her voice small. "No, Anna, we don't," I replied, my tone flat and final. "You made your choice. The conversation is over. You can't just throw away 3 years over one stupid fight," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. "It wasn't a fight, Anna," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "It was a moment of truth. You were presented with a clear and simple choice. Your partner, the man you claim to love, or the man who has been actively trying to destroy our relationship for years. And you chose him. You demanded that I apologize to him. You chose to defend the parasite that has been feeding on our life. That is not something I can forget or forgive." The panic began to dawn on her face as she realized I was not going to yield. But what about our plans?" she stammered. "Law school, the internship?" "Yes, about that," I said, letting the silence stretch for a beat. "The tuition for your final semester is due next week, isn't it? I certainly hope you and Leo have a financial plan for that, because my investment in our shared future has been officially terminated." Her face went slack with shock, the color draining from her cheeks. "What?" she whispered, the word barely audible. "And the internship at my firm," I continued, my voice relentless and unforgiving. "That offer has been rescinded. The firm takes conflicts of interest very seriously, and frankly, so do I." She physically stumbled backward from the door, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of pure horror. That internship wasn't just a job. It was her golden ticket, the launch pad for the entire career she had dreamed of. The future she had been so certain of was evaporating before her very eyes. "You can't do that," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Jack, please, you can't." "I already have," I said. "Actions have consequences, Anna. You gave me an ultimatum. Apologize, or we're over. You chose solve. Now, you get to live with the consequences of that choice. Go ask Leo for help. Go to the man who is so much better than me. I'm sure his creative genius extends to a plan for paying your $50,000 tuition and replacing the legal career you just threw away. I closed the door on her tear-streaked, shattered face. I didn't feel happiness. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound and final quiet. The trial was over. The judgment had been rendered. The fallout was as predictable as it was catastrophic for her. Anna's meticulously planned life imploded. She was forced to drop out of law school, just months shy of graduation. Her dream, the one I'd so eagerly funded, was dead. I heard through the grapevine that she and Leo are still living together in his cramped, squalid apartment. Mutual friends describe it as a special circle of hell. She is apparently consumed by a bitter, corrosive resentment for what his ego cost her. And he is now shackled to a woman who serves as a constant, nagging reminder of his own inadequacy and failure. He won the girl, but he inherited a broken, bitter version of her that he is completely unequipped and unable to fix. I want to be clear, I didn't do any of this for revenge. I'm a lawyer. I believe in contracts. A relationship is a contract, and she violated its most fundamental clause, loyalty. My actions were not a punishment. They were simply an enforcement of the terms. She wanted to know what done really means. Now she knows. It means the support stops, the investment ends, and the builder walks off the site, leaving you alone in the wreckage of the house you helped burn to the ground.